interfering in having a Federal Reserve, or in his case, the second bank of the United States. It distorts people's decision-making. So he says, what has been, whatever must be the consequences of such a sudden and prodigious inflation of the currency? Business stimulated to the most unhealthy activity, a vast amount of overproduction in the mechanic arts, a vast amount of speculation in property of every kind and name at fictitious values, and finally a vast and terrific crash when the treacherous and unsustainable basis crumbles beneath the stupendous fabric of credit and the structure falls to the ground, burying in its ruins thousands who exulted in the fancied security of their elevation. Men nowadays go to bed deeming themselves rich and wake in the morning to find themselves stripped of even the little they really had. They count, deluded creatures, on the continued liberality of the banks, whose persuasive entreaties seduced them into the slippery paths of speculation. So think housing bubble and house flipping. But they have now to learn that the banks cannot help them if they would, and would not if they could. They were free enough to lend their aid when assistance is not needed. But now, when it is indispensable to carry out the projects which would not have been undertaken, but for the temptations they held forth, no further resources can be supplied. And then later in that year, Leggett says, any person who has soberly observed the course of events for the last 3 years must have foreseen the very state of things which now exists. He will see that the banks have been striving with all their might, each emulating the other, to force their issues, that is their paper money, into circulation. He will see that they have used every art of cajolery and allurement to entice men to accept their proffered aid, that in this way they gradually excited a thirst for speculation, which they sedulously stimulated until it increased to a delirious fever, and men in the epidemic frenzy of the hour wildly rushed upon all sorts of desperate adventures. They dug canals where no commerce asked for the means of transportation. They opened roads where no travelers desired to penetrate, and they built cities where there were none to inhabit. We can see these phenomena at work in our own day. The market actors who get hit the hardest in the bust then go to the paper money producer and ask it to use its powers to grant it a bailout, and it usually gets what it wants. Now, is this so obviously the best conceivable system that we don't even need to consider any non-trivial alternatives to it? Is this so obviously superior that it's a good thing that this isn't on the debating table? Well, finally, I will leave with just one example of what's been done in the past to help societies get out of this, because my whole set of remarks tonight has implicitly suggested what needs to be done in the wake of a boom, in the wake of a boom that leads to a bust. Implicitly, it suggested what you need to do. And it turns out that what you need to do is the exact opposite of what they've been doing since George W. Bush. So we're supposed to get change that we can believe in. Yeah, the change is more the same, except much worse. It's just, okay, he spent a whole lot. I'll spend a whole lot. Wow, what change we have the opportunity to vote for in this country. Fantastic, wonderful. Change, has he rebuked the Fed for its behavior? Has he stopped bailing people out? It's the same thing, it's the same thing. So what in fact needs to be done is the following. First of all, don't create any more money hoping to force interest rates lower. You don't want to do that. Putting this money into the banking system and pushing interest rates down. That's the problem. That's the source of the problem. It's not going to get you out of it. It's just going to make it worse. It's just going to hold it off for an even worse bust in the future. So everything Ben Bernanke is doing is exactly wrong. Secondly, no fiscal stimulus either. Fiscal stimulus, the analogy would be, in the wake of the bust, where the home builder is faced with the fact that he's got a dwindling supply of bricks, far fewer than he thought he had. Well, fiscal stimulus is the equivalent of a bunch of vandals coming in at night and, basically splitting up all his bricks, or, 3/4 of them, let's say, so that when he comes the next day to try and salvage what little capital he has, to try to salvage this project, he's got far less to work with. And that's supposed to make you rich because there'll be a multiplier. I mean, it's bizarre. It's all superstitious nonsense. Now, there's much more that can be said about the fiscal stimulus thing, and so in the interest of time, I'll point out that I wrote an article called Tooth Fairy Economics about why fiscal stimulus can't possibly improve things. And so on my website, tomwoods.com, I have an articles thing. So Tooth Fairy Economics, and it's called that because where are they getting the money? Under their pillows? Where does this money, where does $800 billion come from? We just summon it? I mean, again, is this a Ouija board? Where does this come from? And this is like the average guy asks better questions than the U.S. president asks. The U.S. president prides himself on being a good question asker. Well, why don't you ask, where are we getting that $800 billion again? Well, I mean, you're borrowing it, you're printing it. Whatever you're doing, you are drawing down the resources available to wealth generators in the economy, and you're diverting resources into totally arbitrary political projects. There's no way that's a way out. And you certainly don't want to bail people out. You have got to let the economy readjust. You've got to let labor go where labor needs to be. Capital, different types of capital, go into the different lines of production where it belongs. If you extend artificially low interest rates to certain favored industries, or certain favored firms rather, keep them going, well, all you're doing again is perpetuating the mismatch of resources. There's a mismatch of resources in the economy. There's too much of this, too little of that. There has been this mismatch because the central bank's intervention has made certain investments seem profitable that shouldn't have seemed profitable, and that would have been correctly assessed as unprofitable had there been no intervention in the economy. So no bailouts. You need the economy to adjust itself, to reallocate these resources as swiftly as possible where they belong, and then you have recovery. Now, I said that I'm going to stop with an example. The example is the Great Depression of 1920. Some of you people have heard me talk about this. Nobody's ever heard of the Depression of 1920. And in fact, I don't think there was even a Wikipedia entry for it until a few months ago. And not that that means anything, but the Wikipedia has entries for, the drummer in Jethro Tull who was there for 2 albums, and they don't have an entry on the Depression of 1920. I wonder why. Well, I've done some. I have a YouTube on this on tomwoods.com. You scroll down on my blog, and amazingly, it's got like 26,000 views. I can't believe that somebody would sit. I think it's pretty good, but still 26,000. The population is dorkier than I had dreamed it was. It makes me sort of happy. But what did they do in that case? Well, in 1920, we had a severe downturn. We had unemployment shooting up very quickly to 12%, like from almost nothing to 12%. We had massive decline in production. And there are economic historians who will admit that this occurred. I talk about this in the YouTube. Just look it up as Woods 1920. It comes up. I talk about this. They don't know what to make of this because what did the government do to get us out of it? Nothing. Nothing. And by the late summer of 1921, we were already seeing signs of recovery. That's not supposed to happen, according to the pointy heads. It's not supposed to happen. You need your overlords to manage the economy for you. This can't happen. But this is a case of, well, who are you going to believe? Reality, or these people? So what did Warren Harding and Woodrow Wilson was largely incapacitated at the end of